that you are an outspoken Arab man who unapologetically advocates for resistance against the apartheid and now genocidal regime. But I'd like to hone in on some of the things you've said, which have really gotten their tempers fired up. And so, and I'm sure there have been a number of things over the years, because you mentioned that you used language that's demeaning of Zionists.
Yeah.
And why don't you tell me, in your opinion, based on what you've seen and heard in terms of the reactions, what do you think are the three most controversial things you've had to say about Zionists?
Well, obviously, I targeted the Grand Wizard of Zionism in Canada, Erwin Cutler.
Right.
And we have an ongoing, I guess, battle, me and him, all the way back to 2002 with the shutdown of Netanyahu at Concordia University. At the time, Erwin Cutler was the Minister of Justice in Canada. And of course, some would say the Minister of Injustice. And we had, given that the War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity Act is the only person that can charge somebody under that is the Minister of Justice, or the Attorney General, Erwin Cutler. At the time, we had petitioned Erwin Cutler to arrest Netanyahu, and he refused. So we ended up occupying his office, his writing office in Montreal. So he never forgot that, obviously.
I just want to pause there for the benefit of our audience and say that in 2002, and I say this as a lawyer, there was absolutely no question that Netanyahu was a war criminal, because Netanyahu, in his capacity as Israeli leader, minister, prime minister, had done everything he could to expand the settlements in the West Bank. And I'm not even going to get into all the atrocities for which he is directly and indirectly responsible and was at that time. Let's just talk about the settlements so people understand how outrageous it was that Cutler refused to lift a finger to arrest Netanyahu when he was in the jurisdiction of the Canadian government. The settlements are an unequivocal war crime, slam dunk war crime. The forcible transfer of a civilian population to occupied territory is a clear violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention. And in fact, 2004, 2 years later, the International Court of Justice unanimously ruled, even the American judge, that the settlements violate international law. So I just want to say, there's really no plausible justification, if we're going to take seriously the war crimes legislation, the Geneva Convention Act being incorporated into Canadian law, for the Attorney General of Canada not to arrest Netanyahu when he is on Canadian territory.
Yes.
So please continue.
Yes, and maybe some of our viewers wouldn't know this, but Erwin Cutler, his wife, was the personal secretary of Menachem Begin, the Israeli Prime Minister. And their daughter,
who, by the way, was involved in I believe, the Haganah terrorist organization back in the day.
Yes, and so he's a war criminal, butcher, and she was his personal secretary. And the daughter or stepdaughter that took Erwin Cutler's name, the daughter of his wife, it was a Knesset member, a member of the Knesset with the Likud party. Mm-hmm. So clearly the family of Erwin Cutler are even on the extreme right of the fascist in the Zionist colony. So it's not like Erwin Cutler, how they portray him in the Canadian media as a liberal.
So what's the most controversial thing you said about the Grand Wizard of Zionism in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, I said he looks like a circumcised dick with makeup. So right. For them, that was a personal humiliation. And of course, all his Zionist dogs came barking.
And when was this that you called?
This was in 2022.
Uh-huh.
And look, but I want to kind of be clear, the reason that the Canadian government attacked me lately.
I want to come back to that. Let's just focus on this for a second. Would you agree with me, I'm just going to play devil's advocate here, that you can criticize, and I would apply the same commentary to myself, because I've said some things in retrospect, I believe they were absolutely true, they were entirely justified, but in retrospect, if I had found language that was more, shall we say, civilized, it would have probably been better.
Yes.
What do you
Look,
say
listen,
about
I
that?
didn't use the word dick, by the way.
Ah.
I used the word penis.
Okay. Well,
so I used
that's an improvement. So,
you know, the scientific term. I
Right.
also said that Jewish white supremacists are bags of human feces.
Right.
Again, I didn't use slang. I used the scientific
Right.
term for things.
now, I want to pause there.
Yeah.
People may not know this, but when B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights organization, came out with its report on Israeli apartheid, it used that phrase repeatedly, Jewish white supremacy.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Sorry, so go ahead.
So definitely, it is nothing that I say is illegal to say. Nothing that I said is criminal. Nothing that I said could fall under hate speech laws. This is why I have never been charged with such thing. But what the Zionists do in their control of media in Canada, and when I say Zionists control the media in Canada, I don't mean Jews control the media in Canada. For the Rogers family is a Anglo-Protestant family that controls 80-somewhat% of the licensed broadcasters in English, but it is a Zionist family. Similarly, in the French sectors in Canada, the broadcasters is the Peledo family, which is a French Catholic family that is Zionist.
And fanatically so. I think.
Exactly, and they own the majority of the French-speaking media in Quebec and Canada.
Right.
Therefore, the Zionists control the media in Canada, and what they do, knowing that they can't find me guilty of any crime and they can't charge me with hate speech or what have you, they decide to assassinate my name. So it's a political assassination, a destruction of a reputation, of repetitive libelous and defamatory comments about myself without allowing me to appear on this media. I have not been allowed one right to response on any media outlet in Canada.
And let me say, I am a passionate believer, having been on the receiving end of many of these attacks myself, in the right to defend oneself, particularly against an accusation so severe as anti-Semitism. But I have not found myself in the position. I've always maintained some kind of a presence. I don't know how I've managed to do it. Maybe I've just been lucky so that I was able to respond. But they've completely silenced you. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have this discussion with you today is I want people to understand who are watching and listening, is that I've never seen, even in the independent media, not just in the mainstream media, your response to any of these very serious accusations. And I just find that whatever people may think about the language that you've used, whatever they may think about your critique of Israel and Zionism, to say that you shouldn't even have an opportunity to respond to these allegations is outrageous to me.
The only media that gave me space are indigenous media in Canada. And so I was on the Real People's media. We had a panel with indigenous leaders, including the war chief of the Mohawk Nation, and black leaders, and we spoke about these things. So ultimately, what we see is that because they cannot argue, the Zionists cannot argue with me. They will lose any argument. They prefer to not have any argument and just take all the space for themselves to defame their opponents.
So you've mentioned two things. There's the rather unfortunate human feces comment, and then there was the human penis comment. I mean, I can't, even though I myself don't recommend people to use that language, I find it difficult not to be amused by it, only
Yes.
because the people we're talking about, and this is something I think it's very important to say, is that guys like you and I, we always punch up.
Yeah.
We're talking about people who are very powerful, right? Very influential people. We don't spend our time crushing people, even if we disagree with them, who really aren't having an impact on public policy.
Yeah.
So, bringing people down a notch, these power mongers who are using their power in such a depraved way, with language which is admittedly disrespectful.
Yes, and
there's
this insistence that the Zionists have on respectability. I don't have to respect Hitler. I don't have to respect Pol Pot. We don't have to respect criminals. Therefore, this insistence that we only speak about Zionists in respectable language is actually counter to a revolutionary liberationist. We're supposed to be able to humiliate, make fun of these monsters, because the only other thing we can do if we don't joke about them is to take arms against them. How is somebody...
And then we'll end up dead.
Exactly, and
Right.
we'll end up being called terrorists.
Right.
So the only possible thing that a Palestinian, an Arab, a Muslim, Canadian can do to face off with these powerful Zionists is to humiliate them, make fun of them. This is supposed to be the safest thing that you can do. Comedically joke about your opponent. Apparently, that is not allowed for Palestinians. We're not allowed. We have to be respectful when we speak to our genociders.
Now, there have been some rather extraordinary attempts made in the recent past to really completely marginalize you and remove you from any corner of the public discourse, however remote that corner may be. And one of them involved, you have an organization which was doing advocacy work at the CRTC around diversity. Could you tell us briefly about that organization and what happened to it?
Yes, it's the Community Media Advocacy Center, and our main work was focused on the rights of indigenous, racialized, and disability communities to media reflection and employment. We had consulted the Mexican government, for instance, to write its indigenous broadcasting laws, the South African government to write its community television laws. And what the Zionist, what really pissed off the Zionists in Canada is that CMAC became the authority at the CRTC on these files. And what blew their mind was our last participation at the CRTC during the hearing to renew the license of the CBC.